dramatic bits here are expanded.
Yeah.
And Iko, you get to do a lot more dramatically here.
Yeah.
There's that great scene with you talking to your wife on the telephone.
Oh, cool! Thank you.
Yeah. How was that? How was it taking on these more emotional scenes, dialogue-driven
I
scenes?
don't know. And emotional is like Gareth already talked to me about the emotional because I doesn't have a child yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ya setelah itu saya hanya berimajinasi untuk sebelum saya.
Well, at first I would be on the phone with my boss, and it would be a very angry phone call. Then I had to make the switch to a more touching and soft tone when I was on the phone with my wife, who I hadn't seen in over 3 years. It was very challenging to have to switch from one extreme emotion to another so quickly, but I think what helped is when I would talk to Gareth about my real wife, who was pregnant at the time, and he would tell me to imagine not being able to meet my newborn for 3 years.
It was kind of cool in a way. What helped for the role for him, because like I've seen him grow as an actor now. Like I mean, I've always kind of known that he was great as a martial artist, but like, he's got better at that, and he's got better at the drama as well. And yeah, you're welcome. Liverpool reboot. But yeah, so he's but like it's one of these things where it's changed now. The way I direct him has changed. So on the first film on Berandal, like, he had no experience whatsoever, never been in front of a camera before. And so then all of a sudden when it came to doing the drama stuff, I had to kind of treat it in a way a little bit like the choreography, right? Because like Iko had this like photographic memory for the choreography. He'd remember all the steps, all the movements, and how to kind of sell the aggression in the fights. But then when it came to the drama stuff, a lot of times, like for the phone call things, like we do like a walkthrough, where like I could like show him sometimes like, you know, a little bit of show and tell. It's just how we were gonna do like the speed and the gesture and the mannerisms, and then he'd kind of watch me, and then he'd kind of like do his version of that, where he would do that but much better because I suck as an actor. So like it was kind of, that was a little bit different in terms of the first film. Then on the Raid, then we started to get a little bit more complex, more about the psychology of the character. And then on this one, because of his life experience now, because like, you know, like now he's a dad, now he's got like a little girl, and at that time, you know, like Iko was saying, like the expectation of becoming a father meant that I could play into that mindset with him. I could go into his head more, and I could explain to him. I could say, you know, and I mean, we're close outside of the project anyway. It's like he knows my little girl and stuff. Like he knows my family, and then and then I know his and stuff. So like it was easy for me to be able to kind of say like, oh, well, you know, this is how I would feel if I didn't get to see my little girl for like a week. But imagine that stretched out for 3 years, where you not only can't see your kid, but not be able to have any form of communication whatsoever. And so then like that was kind of like the thing. It was easier to make that leap then for him then.
There's a great variety in these action sequences, these fight sequences in the film. I mean, you've got intimate, cramped scenes with a lot of guys or just a few guys. You have a big fight scenes with hundreds of guys, and also a one-on-one fight scene. What, for you, Iko, for the choreography and your team, does a more intimate space, for example, the car sequence where you're sat down in the back of a car, does that jog your creative juices in a different way? Is that flexing a different creative muscle than the bigger kind of, like the prison riot scene?
Semuanya menantang buat saya, tapi soalnya
I think there's a difference in terms of challenge when it comes to the various fight scenes. The adrenaline levels are different when I'm doing one-on-one fighting from when I'm involved in bigger fight scenes with more people. Usually the choreography for the one-on-one duels is much more complex and much longer compared to the larger mass scenes, which are done in smaller bits.
Nggak banyak, tapi untuk agresifnya lebih ke semua fighter.
I want to get your take on violence and the purpose, because it's a very violent film.
Yeah.
What does it serve for you? Because I always feel like the purpose of violence for me, or one of the main purposes, is that it establishes the stakes of the fight scene. The stakes are high because you've seen what will happen if someone messes up. What does violence mean for you?
Well, I mean, like, when it comes to these films, there's like a certain level of aggression there in the fighting style. And for me, it's always been something that's been dictated by the psychology of the scene and the psychology of the character when he's in that violent moment. Like, for when we did Berandal's a much softer film in comparison to the Raid 1 and the Raid 2. In Berandal, it didn't work if it was going to be that violent, because at the start of the movie, for the first hour or so, like, you know, he was playing this pure-hearted good guy who was, you know, coming into another place, didn't want that kind of trouble to kind of bestow upon him. And then whenever he got into these fights, his entire goal was to get out of them, was to escape from them.
Right.
It wasn't to, you know, it wasn't to beat someone down, because these guys weren't like enemies to him. It was just it was set circumstances that put him in the middle of those situations. So in Morantau at the start, it was all about him trying to push rather than punch, trying to escape and climb rather than, you know, face them head on. And then later on, as Morantau progressed, and then as the stakes rose more, there was a change in the character arc, change in the psychology of his character, and change in the psychology of the fighting style. So, you know, in that movie, when the girl got taken then for that last time, and he had to go there to kind of rescue her, to free her, his fighting style was way more direct. It was way more aggressive and way more brutal then. And that was kind of like something that we did within the framework of one film. When it came to the Raid 1, the whole situation is kill or be killed. And we're dealing with a SWAT team that are trained to be able to kind of like handle themselves in these situations where, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, that they will kill every person they come across. Like, you know, there's a bunch of scenes in the fight scenes there where Iko doesn't kill everyone. It's like but it's incapacitated.
Right.
It's that idea of, like, you know, whoever you face as an opponent, that you're gonna take them out to a position where they can't get back up again. They can't become another threat later on, because otherwise it's like that cheeseball thing of, like, you know, hitting the guy down and then turning your back on him and later on he strikes you. Right. So it was like that couldn't happen in the Raid, not in that world. And so the Raid 2 is like an expansion of that. It's another continuation of those themes. It was another way of, like, kind of pushing that envelope a little bit in terms of the violence to make you feel not safe, to make it feel like every character you meet could die, and like to get that kind of sense of danger and threat, like that doesn't happen that often in action films anymore, and I wanted to kind of establish that. But on a level of being, you know, on the subject of, like, screen violence, you know, like away from the psychology of the film, like for me, I've always had this this one thing, which is kind of me and my dad always watch films together ever since I was a kid, and you know, watched a bunch of movies with him, and sometimes it would be like Commando or something, or Scarface or something, or Wild Bunch. And every time there would be like a sequence in the film that was like quite violent, if he felt that it was too strong for me, he would like censor it. He would press pause and then send me out of the room. He'd keep watching it, and then I'd come back in when it was over.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And
manual censoring.
Exactly, yeah. And if I saw something, like there was a scene in Hard Boiled where they're in like the hospital, and you see like the two guys, they're facing off against each other, and there's a bunch of like patients and nurses in the middle. And so, like, they show this like code of honor thing where he says to the nurses to go out and take the patients away because they shouldn't be involved in this moment. And then in the background, the douchebag gangster guy comes in with a machine gun and shoots them all dead.
Right.
And it's this like extreme moment where, like, you know, like, and for me, like, this is like 92, 93, you know, a 13-year-old kid watching like this Hong Kong action movie where suddenly like innocent people were getting killed on the street, and it was like a real dark moment in the film. And when it was over, like, my dad did the whole thing of, like, you know, giving this little moral lesson about it. Like he was saying, like, you know, how he loves the film and he thinks it's visceral, but then this scene has an importance of what is the importance, what is the message, what is the reason behind it, you know, what is it telling us about the characters. And so his thing, and his to this day has always been a film can be violent, it can be visceral, it can create like a sucker punch reaction in an audience. It can make you feel or, like, you know, make you gasp, or even make you laugh. It doesn't matter how you respond to what you're seeing. But he said, like, the only thing he hates and the only thing he doesn't like is when the focus is on pain and suffering, when it's on purely on torture. And so that's like one thing that we've kind of like tried to avoid in our stuff, to, like, you know, not have a moment there where you're completely, you know, close-up, detail, focus on somebody being slowly hurt or maimed or killed in some way, where you're focusing entirely on the sort of like the vulnerability and the pain of that person. What we tend to do in ours is, whenever it comes to the big action sequences, those martial arts sequences, those action scenes, those gunplay bits, those car moments, they're quick, they're fast, and they hit you hard, and then we cut away, and then we show you something else, and we'll build to something else again, and then we'll hit you again, but then we'll come away in it, and we won't focus on a guy, you know, being pulled apart and stuff like that. So there's like that's just me and my approach, out of respect for what my dad gave me as a child growing up watching films.